This lizard rivals a Saint Bernard, not just in size, but also in gross slobber. But whereas a Saint Bernard wants to cover you in kisses, this monitor would be more interested in ripping off your whole face and swallowing it in a single gulp. Let's get into it with the infamous Komodo Dragon. Hi, I'm Danielle Dufault, and you're watching Animalogic. Today we're talking about the world's largest living lizard, the Komodo Dragon. Komodo dragons are one of the over 80 species of monitor lizards, a genus known as Varanus. All of these lizards share some characteristics, like being carnivorous and having long necks, powerful tails, and well-developed limbs. The smallest of all is the Dampier Peninsula monitor, which is just 20 centimeters long. The biggest is, of course, the star of this episode, the Komodo Dragon. So now I must ask you, what's the biggest lizard you've ever seen? Maybe it's a 1.5 meter long green iguana that can tip the scales at around 8 kilos? If we want to understand just how large a Komodo dragon can get, we need to double the length of a green iguana and add about 160 more kilos. That's right, the lordiest Komodo ever known clocked in at 166 kilos. That is heavier than the largest dog ever recorded, a Saint Bernard named Benedictine, who was a whopping 162 kilos. Aside from fighting in the same weight class and having mouths dripping with drool, that's pretty much where the similarities between a Saint Bernard and a Komodo dragon end. While Saint Bernards were bred by holy men to save people in peril and are famous for being gentle giants, Komodo dragons are armed, dangerous, and seem like they were dreamt up in hell. Komodo dragons are stacked to the literal teeth with traits that make them terrifying killing machines. Though they aren't usually interested in eating us, an attack from a Komodo dragon is lethal, even for us. So let's break down all the reasons a Komodo dragon should not be messed with. While a Komodo dragon doesn't have the bite force of some of its other reptilian brethren, like alligators and crocodiles, when it lacks in power, it makes up for in sheer intensity. The bite of a Komodo starts with the long, curved, and serrated blade-like teeth to pierce the prey's flesh. And these teeth take the words blade-like to a whole new level. It was recently discovered that Komodo teeth are actually coated with iron. A recent study showed that the serrations of the Komodo's teeth are kept razor sharp thanks to a coat of iron. The concentration of iron is actually so high that these serrations appear visibly orange to the naked eye. To learn more about their amazing teeth, we talked to my old friend Dr. Aaron LeBlanc, the researcher behind the study. So what makes Komodo teeth so special?
One of the weird mysteries is Komodo dragons are well known for being able to tackle prey much larger than themselves and using those serrated teeth to cut off large chunks of meat. But the part that interacts with the food, the enamel, the hard part of our teeth that you and I brush every day, on a Komodo dragon is literally paper thin. It's just a mere fraction of the thickness of the enamel on your teeth and my teeth. But it still clearly performs this cutting function. So we wanted to understand how that works. And in looking at Komodo dragon teeth under the microscope, I realized that the serrated cutting edge always looked stained.
Iron-coated teeth are not as weird as you might think. Some of our neighborhood creatures, like rats and mice, as well as the famously strong-toothed beaver, have iron in their enamel. That's why their incisors look so rough.
I think calling them iron-coated teeth is true. I think that's accurate. A lot of, like beavers, they incorporate that iron into their enamel. Komodo dragons don't. It's like icing on a cake. It's an iron-rich calcium pore coating that tells us it's not in the enamel, it's actually on top. The iron coating itself is 1/1000th of a millimeter thick. But we know it's involved in keeping the teeth sharp because it's only found on the serrated edges of their teeth.
So once they've sunken their mouth knives into the flesh of their prey, They use their powerful neck muscles to thrash it back and forth, ripping and tearing until it is done. Komodo, more like Como Doom. All the while, the Komodo dragon gets their ridiculously long and rigid claws into the slashing and thrashing game. If their prey does somehow manage to escape, the Komodo dragon doesn't need to worry. It just has to bide its time. That's because venom glands in the Komodo's mouth add a powerful anticoagulant to its sticky saliva. The prey will bleed out and be left for Komodo food. This is a new discovery. For a long time, we all believed that Komodo dragons had boatloads of bacteria in their mouths to give their prey nasty infections. This has been officially debunked. Any dentist would be proud of the oral hygiene of Komodo dragons, who do have cleaner mouths than we do. And in an Animalogic exclusive, we got the responsible researcher for that discovery to tell us all about it.
My name is Professor Brian Fry. I'm a toxicologist at the University of Queensland. The venom is there to act in a supporting role to the teeth, because these teeth are incredible. You know, they're double serrated. They're serrated in the forward and the backward sides. We're talking about the venom, where it's basically like you've got a poison-tipped blade now. The poison helps the effect of the blade. With larger prey, the Komodos will attack and then kind of sit back and just wait for them to bleed out. Now, just from the wounds of the teeth, long before the venom would kick in, about 60 to 70% of the prey bleed out in about 10 to 15 minutes, just from the catastrophic blood loss. But our field of observations and that of other groups have shown that an additional 20 to 25% of the prey bleed out from persistent, prolonged bleeding over the next 3 to 4 hours, often being bit repeatedly by the Komodos. And that's due to the venom, the anticoagulant effects of the venom, where these wounds will not stop bleeding. So with the addition of the venom, that means that Komodos have, instead of a 60 to 70% predatory success rate, they've got a predatory success rate of around 90 to 95%, which puts them into super predator level. This is a predatory success rate of animals that are in their natural prey range of almost unparalleled success. It's a higher success rate than an African lion. It's a higher success rate than a great white. This makes them one of, if not the most successful predators still around on Earth. So it's extraordinary, that contribution of the venom aids and, brings them up.
But how are we so sure it's actually venom?
If you look at the picture of any Komodo dragon or any monitor lizard, you'll see a bulge running the lower jaw. And that's this hollow venom gland that's the same venom gland as like the iconic Gila monster or the beaded lizard of Mexico, where these are well established as venomous lizards. It's the exact same gland, producing many of the exact same toxins with the exact same pathophysiological actions.
Makes sense. It doesn't even matter if their prey somehow manages to stagger away and drops dead somewhere secluded. Their incredible sense of smell allows them to sniff out rotting flesh up to 4 kilometers away. And Komodo dragons certainly have a keen sense of smell. The forked tongues aren't just devilish in appearance, they also help the Komodo dragon to determine from which direction a scent is coming. The forked tongue samples the air around it and brings those scent molecules into its mouth to make contact with the Jacobson's organ. If there's slightly more molecules on the left fork of the tongue than on the right, the Komodo knows that the scent is coming from the left. That's so cool. I need that. While it was recently discovered that humans are capable of smelling over 1 trillion scents, our Jacobson's organ probably doesn't play much, if any, of a role for us. That's because in human adults, this organ, also called the vomeronasal organ, is likely vestigial. In other animals, this organ is responsible for smelling pheromones. Because we rely so heavily on eyesight, This scent-based detector probably became less and less important as we evolved. But researchers are still trying to determine its importance for us today. Okay, so now that we know all that, when did we start calling them dragons? In 1910, when Komodo dragons were first encountered by European scientists after they'd heard whispers about a giant lizard in the Lesser Sunda Islands of Indonesia, they called them Varanus komodoensis, meaning simply monitor lizard of Komodo. That is despite describing them as essentially MLOUS, or monitor lizards of unusual size. In 1926, when 2 live Komodos were captured for the first time, it was determined that the scientific name lacked panache. It wasn't the cat's pajamas. It needed some razzle-dazzle. It was then that the plain old monitor lizard of Komodo was first anointed with the title of dragon in the 1927 book, Dragon Lizards of Komodo. And in a way, Komodos are as mythical and elusive as dragons. They only exist on a few islands in Indonesia, with an estimated 2,500 individuals remaining in the wild. So while we may be afraid of Komodo dragons, what we should really be is afraid for these endangered monitors. Those Komodo dragons that live within the bounds of Komodo National Park are much safer, while those that live outside are especially threatened by human populations. While they can run at up to 20 kilometers an hour, we know that Komodos like to keep to their familiar areas and hardly roam too far from home. Females, for example, will always lay their eggs in the same nesting spot. And while Komodos can swim, it seems that they only occasionally set forth by sea in search of a different island home. All of that contributes to their limited numbers. Reproduction is a relatively slow process too. Females reach sexual maturity at around 6 years old, at which point they start producing 1 clutch of eggs per year. To mate, females first begin by leaving scent traces in her poop, which the males will follow. Remember those pheromone detectors on the roof of their mouths? Now is when they come in extra handy. If another male wants to court her, they'll engage in a brutal fight for her affection. But the loser doesn't need to worry too much about dying from their wounds, as Komodos are immune to each other's venom. The winning male will start licking the female gently. If she licks him back, he's cleared for mating. Even if they can't find a mate, Komodo females are more than happy to stay single ladies. That's because Komodo females are capable of parthenogenesis, which is basically reproduction without fertilization. This is possible because female Komodo dragons are born with both male and female chromosomes. The trade-off is that the clutch will only produce male offspring, and too much can lead to inbreeding. The female will lay her eggs in the hole that she's dug for this purpose, and guard her clutch for the first few months of their 8-month incubation. Once they hatch, it's straight up a tree. Komodo dragon babies instinctively flee up trees to avoid being cannibalized by nearby adults, which consider them an easy meal. When they're on the ground, the juveniles will roll around and poop to deter adult Komodos from gobbling them up. That's because Komodos will eat pretty much anything that moves. Or that was once moving anyway.
And this is one of the projects that we want to do next is baby Komodos spend the first year of their life, they're like a crocodile monitor. They're full-time in the trees. So they're feeding on different animals and they're feeding with a different prey escape potential. So do the babies have a venom that's like that of a crocodile monitor where it's more neurotoxic than blood-acting? And does it shift to becoming a more blood-acting venom like the adults as they spend more and more time on the ground and feeding on animals that way? So that's definitely one of the next major projects we want to do is looking at changes through time.
Yep, Komodo dragons may be the world's least picky eaters. Living prey, dead carcasses, small as a rodent, big as a water buffalo, their own kind, bones, hooves, hide. The Komodo doesn't discriminate when it comes to a good meal. and their appetite matches their size. They are capable of gobbling up 80% of their body weight in a single meal. While they are good runners, Komodos prefer to use their stealth and power to hunt. They'll lay in wait along a game trail for hours until just the right candidate for a meal roams by. That's when they launch into attack mode, snatching and quickly overpowering their prey. Despite being cannibals, Komodos will also, somewhat confusingly, share a meal together. Their strong throat muscles and hinged jaws allow them to gulp down huge chunks of a meal in a single swallow. Their stomachs can expand to an enormous size to accommodate all of that meat. These mega meals will sustain them for upwards of a whole month. Imagine if we humans only had to eat 12 times a year? I'd save so much money on tacos. While Komodo dragons are the world's largest living lizard, they are not the biggest monitor lizard to have ever lived. That title, as far as we've discovered anyway, goes to Megalania, which may well have weighed up to 2,000 kilograms and reached lengths of 7 meters. That's the length of a city bus. Megalania roamed Australia during the last ice age, in the era of megafauna. It was so recent, in fact, that Megalania even lived on the continent when humans also started to inhabit Australia. Given the title of largest extant species, it shouldn't come as a shock to learn that the Komodo dragon is the closest living relative of Megalania. While Megalania died out long ago, these two monitors were actually contemporaries. Komodos evolved more than 3 million years ago in Australia, so Komodos and Megalania would have been wandering around the continent at the same time.
So Komodos radiated from Australia out into parts of Indonesia. Megalania didn't leave Australia. Komodos, Megalania, and the other species all went extinct in Australia when the megafauna declined. So the oldest fossils of a Komodo are about 3.5 million years old, and they're found here in Queensland. They only went to the islands in Indonesia about 1 million years ago.
It really makes you wonder, why then are Komodos still walking the earth while Megalania are nothing but fossils, along with Australia's other megafauna? There are a number of theories. Some researchers believe that it was climate change that brought down these giants. However, this hypothesis is becoming more highly contested. Fossil evidence suggests that megafauna populations fluctuated with the changing climate, but that it wasn't the main cause of their extinction. The extinction of Megalania was likely caused by the arrival of humans in Australia. Some theories suggest that overhunting, especially of juveniles, could have caused Megalania populations to collapse. Another theory is that human-made fire could have destroyed megafauna habitats. Basically, the exact same reasons today's Komodos are currently endangered, just fast forward 40,000 years. Unlike back then, however, there are conservation efforts that aim to preserve this monster monitor and its limited habitat for generations to come. Organizations like the Tarragona Conservation Society Australia, the Komodo Survival Program, Global Conservation, and many zoos around the world are trying to keep these lizards alive and thriving. Okay, so given everything we know about Komodos now, I think we can safely say that we all understand that they're not actually dragons. But can we keep the name? It's actually pretty cool, and I bet they like being called dragons. I know I would. So what should we talk about next? Please let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for new episodes every week. Thanks for watching, and if you feel like learning a little more about giant monitor lizards, why don't you follow this up with our episode on Megalania. Thanks for watching. See you later. Along with Australia's other megafauna, Australia's megafauna. Also, just follow my tongue. Yeah.
Where's the taco shop?
Tacos.